I hope you all can see the main screen. It's a welcome to everybody that's joined us today. So thank you. As I mentioned right at the beginning, this webinar is being recorded, so you can listen to it again, and you can also share it amongst your network, which is on the Chamber webinar library, Chamber website. You can just log into that, or just go into that and select webinar library to listen to it again and share. So I'm Narinda Multani here at the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. I actually work quite closely with businesses in the Thames Valley in lots of different ways, and that's through the membership portfolio of benefits and services we provide. So I'm going to bring up a question, and it's a poll. So I'm sure you can all see it. And it's asking, how often do you need to convey important messages from data to others? So I hope you can see that, and if you could just maybe answer that.
So we thought we'd start with just getting a bit of a feel for where you're all coming from in this area.
Okay, answers are coming through. Okay, frequently looks like it's at 50%. Sometimes 50%. Oh, it's going down, it's changing now. This is good because I haven't done a poll before. So Amanda's actually guided me in how to do this, and it's quite good. And it makes the webinar quite interactive as well, and quite engaging. So this is good. So I can see A, frequently, 38% of you.
If you click the end polling, then you'll be able to, and then you can share the results with the share the results, and everybody can see.
Yeah, so that's the results. So we've got sometimes 50%. Okay, is that okay, Amanda?
Yep, hopefully everybody can see that on their screen. So let's look at that. So how often do you need to convey important messages from data to others? Clearly, a lot of you are doing it quite frequently and quite often. So over 50% of you are doing it, you know, I'd imagine certainly weekly, if not more often than that. So great that you're able to come on here today and talk a bit more about how can you take the way you do that to a new level that hopefully can get you even more engagement. And with half of you doing it sometimes, it's a good place to start as well. So what'll be useful in the context of this session is that those who are already quite familiar with it, as we're going through, please do share your experiences and your kind of examples that you might have in the chat box. And we'll be picking that up, and Narinda will be watching that very closely as we go through to be able to sort of add in other people's perspectives as we go through. And again, for those who are doing it less frequently to date, then if there are certain questions or queries that you've got as we're going through there, do again go into the chat box and flag that, and then we can make sure we cover some of those things off. So hopefully we'll all learn something across this time. And looking at the second question then, in terms of how often do you think your audience understands the full implications of the data you're sharing? Well, it's great that there's over 60% are saying quite often. Fantastic. You might just be being modest that nobody's gone for the frequently, but it's like anything. We know sometimes it's hard to get our point across all the time. So with that split there, I can see that there are hopefully things and small tools as well today, as well as some bigger concepts that you'll be able to take away and build in to how you convey data going forward. That'll get you into that frequently, everybody really understanding what it is you're trying to achieve. So without further ado then, we will go into the actual session itself.
Okay, that's great. So Amanda will be delivering today's webinar. So I'm just going to pass you over to Amanda. She'll introduce herself, and as Amanda's already mentioned, if you have any questions, post them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring that, and then Amanda will answer your questions accordingly. So this is great. I'm going to now move over to the next slide, and Amanda, that's over to you. Okay.
Great. Well, yes, I thought, given our topic, I would start with sharing. Let me share you 3 data points that in themselves tell a story. 588 months, 206 months, and 30 months. I'd be interested if anybody had a view as to what that story is that those data points are telling us. And do, you know, if you come up with something, put it in the chat box. I'm going to come back to that right at the end. So I'm just going to leave that thought with you. But where I want to really start is make you think back to, say, about a year ago. So when life was a bit different, before all the changes that we've been going through at the moment. And during your working context. And you're dealing, for example, typically with data might be financial. So you're going to sessions, budget meetings, updates, where there are a lot of numbers, tables, charts. What was that like for you? Imagine having the experience that you used to have then about people sharing data with you. Or perhaps you were involved in research or analysis. So a lot of what you were trying to get across and other people were also trying to share with you was, it could be scientific data, really wanting to share what is the underlying meaning behind this. How can we make a decision based on the results of these experiments or this research? Well, similarly, you may have had in the past also in the office environment be working on projects and programs where you're having to review, decipher, analyze the project status, the detailed milestones, for example, the complex risk registers, lots of different elements and data points that need to be absorbed and understood so that you can then make the right decisions going forward. And when we think back to those sorts of times in what was before, what I want to talk about today is really how we can move from it being quite a challenging situation, a bit like this. So Tom Fishburne is a very good person for capturing the mood of things in the workplace. And I particularly liked his example here, where he talks about in the workplace and in those contexts we've just described, there might be a remarkable idea in there that needs to be shared, but it's rendered lifeless. And I know I've been in lots of meetings like that, unfortunately. And what really we want to get to a point is when you're dealing with lots of data in all its forms in the commercial environment, we want to get to a space like this, where the data that you're sharing becomes a landscape of ideas that others are really buying into. There's wonder and intrigue there, ideally, as to how you're sharing the key underlying data. So how do we move from one to the other? Well, it's all about, one key element is about persuasive data storytelling. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, and I'm going to talk about it covering 3 different areas. Firstly, I'm going to look at the data itself. Then I'm going to talk about the people that you're sharing that data with. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about the results that you're actually seeking. And as Narinda's also already mentioned, as we go through stuff, again, Zoom, virtual, it's never ideal compared to being in the same room, but do post your chat, your comments or questions as we go through, and we'll pick them up as we go along. So let's get stuck in with that very first area, the data itself. So I want to put an idea to you. The data itself does not have meaning. Data itself does not have meaning. What we need to do is that meaning needs to be extracted. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Well, let's go back a bit to the beginning and talk about this guy, a guy called Herman Hollerith. So Herman Hollerith was employed in 1880 by the US government as part of the US Census of that year. And as you can imagine, it was a very time-intensive, laborious process.
Sorry, Amanda, to stop you there.
Yep.
It seems like there's some interruption in between. Is everybody okay on the other side in hearing Amanda? Because when I'm trying to listen, there is a little bit of, it just seems like it's cutting out in between.
Okay.
In the chat box, if everybody just can confirm all is okay, you can hear Amanda. Yes, cutting out. Okay.
Okay, right.
No, I couldn't hear. There's a
Breaking
lot of
up,
yeah.
interference.
Okay, we can hear you okay now, but it was just in between, and I.
Okay.
Okay.
How is it? If I keep talking now, how does that
Yeah,
sound?
that's fine. Yep, keep going,
Right.
Amanda.
Yeah,
Yep, thank
is it
you.
better? Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. No, the microwave isn't on, Gareth. Thank you. Yes. So Herman is so the interesting thing about Herman is he went away from that experience of saying there must be a better way that we can take this data and get anything out of it much more effectively. And what he did was ended up creating a new machine. I'm just checking, is that sound getting better or worse?
It's okay now, but in just a little few seconds back, it was a little bit worse.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. Fine, Amanda, keep going.
Okay. So, right. Yes, Herman and his machine. As you can see there, so he was the inventor of the punch card machine, where it was the first time when large sets of data were being taken and analyzed in such a way so that more meaning could be extracted in a very meaningful way. His design was very successful. They used it in subsequent US censuses, 1890, 1910. And what's interesting is ultimately his company, which was the Tabulation Machine Company, changed its name a few years later to the International Business Machines Company Corporation, which we all now know as IBM. But what was funny about him is, I will try that actually, sorry, I can see that I will take off my video and see if that helps on the sound, okay?
Thank you.
So, extracting meaning from data is where we are. And Herman does that whole process for you. Let's look, okay, so that was a long time ago. What's happening now? The world has changed considerably, clearly, since then. And I'm just trying to get on to our next slide here.
No, Amanda, okay. Just bear with me, Amanda.
Yep. I've just checked out.
Yep. Try now.
Okay. Can you, if you can move it on from, here we go. There we are, right, yes. Technology is great, isn't it? So let's look at that situation today. 181 million years, that's what they're estimating it would take to download all the data from the internet. Why does that matter in this context? Because clearly we are swimming in data, even drowning in data, but it's very valuable stuff. So if we can understand how we convey the meaning from this huge set of information, that can really help feed into decision making, ideas, innovation, etc., and make everything work so much better as we go forward, particularly given the crises that we're in at the moment. And we have new tools for doing that. AI, machine learning, very clever people like data scientists. But actually you have to watch how you then choose to convey meaning from data. Because if let's go for a specific example. Here's a statistic that actually the meaning of which can be a bit confusing. So in 2018, a survey conducted in the US said 73% of drivers thought that they were better than average at driving. Now, if you're conveying that to your audience, that it's confusing, because how can more than 50% be better than average? Now, there is an aspect when you're looking at mean and median that actually renders that statement accurate. But the watch out on something like this is that you need to be sure that people get the understanding of the meaning you're trying to put on it from your context. So for example, I look at that, I think, well, actually, if I was running a business which was offering services regarding self-awareness training, that would be a useful thing to understand. I can pitch my services to a new set of customers in this case, all those drivers who are potentially not as self-aware as they could be. Or looking at it from the education field, is there a need for a different approach to how we understand what averaging is in maths? Or finally, in the more public policy field, if I'm doing research on traffic accidents, I can use this type of data and extract the meaning relevant to my research to understand how to do better planning regarding traffic accident hotspots if we have an overconfidence in drivers, for example. So different meanings can be extracted depending on your context, but you have to make it very clear to the person that you're doing that for. And in fact, I've got an exercise, a quick little exercise and thought for you on this next one. So in the chat box, here's a chart, recent chart, earlier this month, reputable source. What meaning, what do you take from that chart? What is it telling you instinctively? If you want to note any quick thoughts in the chat box. From a visual perspective, clearly it's a wiggly line and then it suddenly takes a massive dive. So we've got several options regarding that car sales percentage growth.
So Amanda, we've got Gareth Bunn. He said not selling more cars than previously.
Yep.
Shawl, could car sales be the same as before as this relates to growth? It's a question.
Yep.
And then Michael Pitfield, car sales have plummeted. So I do agree with that because I've recently heard it on the news. Obviously due to the current situation. So
what's interesting from that is that there are slightly different interpretations of what that data is showing, the meaning of that data to different people, depending where you're coming at it from. And all of those are very valid perspectives. Now, this chart there was narrative associated with it above and below, but of course it depends whether you can be bothered to read those words or whether you're just going to take a snapshot of what that line is telling you and make an interpretation of it. But if you're the person who's created that chart to convey a certain meaning, it could be those suggested so far. It could also be, and which is what the author was intending, it's not just that rather than actually the sort of the car manufacturer perspective about the market having died, it was looking more at what the alternatives would be and the improvements for other certain groups of users and stakeholders. So, for example, with a massive drop-off in sales, the anticipation is that potentially there could be a lot more electric vehicles coming into the market more quickly than they would have been doing before to try and stimulate demand. And also there's recognition that with the pandemic issues, people are significantly more aware of the impact of cars, traditional cars on emissions levels, etc. And there's also the positive aspect from a car buyer perspective that lots of manufacturers will be looking to do very interesting deals, could be scrappage or finance deals, etc., to encourage people to get back into buying cars. Now, the point of looking at something like this is that this graph can mean different things to different people. And if you're the owner of the graph, you want people to get very quickly what it is you're trying to convey about that graph without them having to read paragraphs of text all around it as well. So thank you for putting your perspectives in there. So we've kind of gone from a little bit of a history tour there from Herman first thinking about actually we need to find a ways of quickly and easily extracting meaning from these data sets that we've got, all the way through to the we have now, and recognizing that it can be misinterpreted or interpreted in different ways than was intended. All of which comes together back to that first idea of data in itself is not where the meaning lives. You need to extract meaning from that data. So there's work to be done from just putting your graph out there and hoping that the person will get what you're really trying to convey in that session. So having looked at the data itself, we're just going to move on to looking at the people that you're showing it with and the kind of impact that they have on all of this. So let me phrase that in an idea around knowing your audience is key. In persuasive data storytelling, knowing your audience is key. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're moving here from starting where we talked about understanding the meaning in your data and really getting that clear in your own mind as to how you want to convey that, to talking about how do I then communicate that meaning, out to others. And the ways to approach those two things are not the same. This particular quote here, I like this one, and it also reminds me as well all the time, is that often we think, well, if we, we've done really great analysis, we've got the number of what the issue is, now let's just share that with everybody. And because I've communicated out, then everybody knows it, everybody understands it. And that's one of the biggest challenges of communication. You understand it, it does not mean that your listener or your viewer understands it. So what is it that we need to be thinking about more carefully in this kind of space? Well, it's thinking about communication. What is the purpose of communication? What are we doing it for? Is it just to tell them? Well, actually, it's more about we want to influence them in some way. And by that, I mean we want them to either think about something in a different way, or feel a different perspective on something, or act in a certain way. So it's about getting your audience to do something, to have some kind of action as a result when you've communicated your analysis and your data. We started from this diagnosis piece. We want them to have a behavior of some sort as a result of hearing what we've got to say. And so we've kind of got to cross that bridge between those two different perspectives. And that bridge, in some contexts, can sometimes actually be described as a bit of a chasm. And that chasm is between the difference between what I say in terms of the data I'm communicating versus what the person hearing it and absorbing it actually does as a result of what I've said. And here's where we start to get really interesting about how do you make that leap. Too often at the moment, and back to that car sales example, is that people assume if I put the data out there, the graph, the squiggly line, and I know what that data means, that the other person will too, and as a result, they'll do something about it. Well, I'm sure we can all think of lots of examples where we thought somebody was going to do something as a result of us having shared an insight and some information, and actually nothing happened. And that's the challenge. We need to really think much more carefully about how do we get somebody to actually do something as a result of what they're understanding from our very carefully curated data. And that's about bringing in this concept of ideas and starting to change the way you convey the meaning from your data into an idea that you're getting across to them. An idea which you then follow with evidence to support why that idea is appropriate, which leads them down the journey of being persuaded. Oh, right, okay, yes, you've put that proposition and now you've given me some supporting evidence. Yes, I think I agree with that idea, actually. And then we talk about how you compel them to actually do something once they've agreed it. But just unpacking that a bit and crossing that over, and these ideas, different people like different things. And this is where we get to the concept of understanding your audience really carefully. And by audience, I mean it can be your boss that you're presenting your project update to. It can be a customer that you're trying to convince to use your solution rather than a competitor's solution. The challenge is everybody will have a different set of information that they react to, that they are attracted by, that they find interesting. And your job as a data storyteller is to tap into what is relevant for that particular person. What will spark their interest more so than the next person? So how do we do that? Well, there's a whole range of things. It doesn't have to be complicated. If you're going to link with a certain person, you can either, if it's in your organization, you can speak to others about, what works for them, what appeals to them most in terms of, signing off business cases, for example. If it's external, Google is a great resource to find out what people are really drawn by, and even social media channels, and these play a more important role day by day, because there you're being able to see what people are liking, physically liking in terms of the little hands up sign, what they're also posting about, so what's close to their heart, what are they sharing, and what comments are they making on others. So you can get a very good understanding of what appeals to that particular person or that particular group or that specific organization. And if you understand what triggers their interest, you can then work on how you shape the wording of the idea that you want to get across to them related to the data that you've pulled the meaning out from. To kind of bring it to life a bit, let's just look at an example of someone who did this very well. So 2007, Steve Jobs, 9th of January, he launched the iPhone. If you've not seen his presentation on this, which is on YouTube, it's definitely worth watching. At that point in time, and again, we're thinking that's 13 years ago now, he was revolutionary, and he still is very sort of out there compared to what you might see in a lot of other contexts of how people convey their ideas. So there's still a lot to learn from the way he did it. And to reassure people, he used to practice that about 200 times before he did it for real. So in his very early presentations, he wasn't like that at all. So this is stuff that everybody can learn. You don't have to be born like this. But the point about highlighting him in this context is that he really knew his audience. And in some ways, it wasn't what you would expect it to be. So who was his audience in that kind of context? Well, actually, at those sort of Apple events, they were typically very technical people, very deeply IT focused. And so you'd have thought, oh, they'll be into the whole configuration and the setup and how did you bring that technology together to make it work like this, like that. But he didn't do any of that. In that particular presentation, he focused very much on selling the idea of what you had in your pocket and this 3 products in one. So he'd already launched the iPod a couple of years previously, revolutionized the music industry as he described it. And what he was doing there today was revolutionizing the phone. Now, people who are very heavily into and very experienced technology people also love cutting edge and what the latest gadget is, and being first and really being able to try very exciting things with new technology. He really understood that about that audience, tapped into it very carefully, and therefore all the years of data and research and analysis that had gone into actually creating the iPod product, he summed that up and extracted meaning out of it that was very specific to the audience he was trying to attract to buy this. Definitely worth having a look at how he did it and thinking that through about his understanding of his audience that he was playing to. So we've looked at how to move from, once you've extracted your meaning, into thinking about communicating it, and that requires a different kind of level of thinking too, and making it very relevant to the people that you're trying to shape into. Which brings us
to that slide. Sorry, Amanda, sorry. It's just interesting to see how pictures capture attention better than slogans or words. Just by looking at that, you automatically know that's something to do with Apple. So yeah, just interesting to see how pictures just capture your attention immediately rather than slogans and words.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, and we'll see a bit more about that later on. Absolutely, and again, he was doing that years and years ago. Obviously, that's much more common now, but still, a lot of people use words and text, whereas you can be much more impactful. So, no, thank you for raising that. We'll come back to that one.
Thank you.
So, knowing your audience really is key. So we've looked at the data itself. We've looked at the people now that you're sharing with. What we also need to consider in persuasive storytelling is, what are you trying to achieve? What's the result you seek? So this third idea that I want to talk you through is that action that you seek depends on you creating memory. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if I don't remember then I won't do anything. If you've led me to understand and through a discourse that takes me to, makes me think I need to buy your product or sign off the investment case, if when 5 minutes after I've walked out the room, I don't actually remember that, no action will occur. And it's not one we typically think of. Of course I remember. Well, we don't. The brain doesn't quite work like that. So imagine you're full of a room full of people and they're staring at you, and you've just shared all your wonderful insights here, and you've really tried to think about who you're talking to, so you've tailored it very specifically to them. But are they going to remember it? Well, the first thing you need to understand is that the human brain is wired in a way that actually doesn't make it very conducive for us to remember a lot. We get fired with an awful lot of stuff at us. And the first thing that happens is that information gets put into your short-term memory. And it's only a few minutes that it stays there, around about 5 minutes. And you can keep about up to 5 items, give or take 7, give or take 2 items in one time. Because when the next one comes along, your brain's going to make a choice. Your short-term memory is going to make a choice. Do I keep all this stuff already that I've got in here that I've just heard about the new insights from this data? Or do I forget one of those things they've told me and let the new one come in? And your brain is constantly doing that. And some of the things will drop out and you just won't remember that they were mentioned at all. But some of the things won't. Some of the things will move into long-term memory. And there are certain steps that you can do to encourage that, which we'll have a look in a second. But the key thing I wanted to get across is that it's very easy for things to leak out of memory. And however interesting you think you were, or convincing that you think you were, you must also remember how can you make it land and stay in someone's memory. And that's, a lot of that is about creating connection. But it's hard to do. It's hard to do. Not least, as we've talked about, the difference on the memory, short-term memory and long-term memory. But the other angle, the key one that you can think about, is about bias. Now, this diagram is done based on work done by a guy called Buster Benson. And the full write-up and also his description of all of this is on Medium, for those who use the social media channel Medium. It's a very good summary there of it. What he's done is he spent his paternity leave actually looking at all the different bias that we have in our brains, 175 of them, and he put them into categories. And out of those categories, he created themes and created this very useful visual in conjunction with someone else about what all those themes represent. Well, what it's telling you here is that there's an awful lot of stuff going in your brain and going in my brain and everybody else's brain that's making it hard for us to remember, where our brain is trying to be as efficient as possible and therefore uses certain processes, which is encapsulated by all these bias, to filter out stuff that we don't really want to keep. Now, the challenge for you as wanting to convey your data effectively is that you need to get past some of those, or at least recognize that they're there and think about how you can position your information the best way. So let's make this practical. But one thing I wanted to notice about this diagram is you may not have heard a lot of what I just said in the last few minutes, because you've probably spent quite a bit of time looking at this diagram thinking, what does that say? That font is so small. Hang on, let me change my glasses. Let me find where have I got a magnifying glass? And this is a really common thing that is easy to forget when you have a complex situation you're trying to explain to people. I would never recommend you do what I've just done, which is put something as detailed as this up on a slide, because I've lost your attention while you've tried to figure out what the words say on it. Now, if I wanted to do something like this and share it, one little tip is much better way is to say, I'm going to show you something quite complicated, but actually for the purposes of today's session, I just want to zoom in on one section. And you can literally do that, zoom in a section. Now you can at least read 4 things in the too much information section, and it's much more easy for us to then engage on that, and your mind hasn't wandered onto other things. But notwithstanding that it's a bad way of showing it on PowerPoint here, and which was done on purpose, obviously, it's a very useful set of information that's worth looking up at Buster Benson. One of the things he talks about, and one of the biases, is that boring won't cut it. Now, boring means different things to different people. But if you take this example, you won't, and I've deliberately put something provocative there, you don't often see what looks like a bit of a mean snake in a business presentation. But why have I done that there? Because I want to put something that is not expected into it to prompt an interest level. And then the message on that, around that, I'm halfway there to getting your attention on it. So again, it's a useful thing to think about when you want to try and trigger intrigue and engagement from people. Go outside what is the norm, within reason, to get people to pay attention, or they will switch off. So what I would like to do now is a little bit of a check with you using our second poll. And I'm about to show you a slide which has got various stuff on it. And the poll will just ask you, what's the very first thing you notice? And then there's a second question. So I'll put the slide up for a minute, and then Narinder, if you're able to then put the poll up once there's a couple of seconds have gone, and if everybody could then answer the questions, and we'll just see what the takeaway is.
Okay.
So if the poll...
Ready, Amanda? Yep.
Yep, if you put the poll up, that'd be great.
Okay.
Oh, it's the other poll. Yeah.
Okay, just bear with me.
Choose the other one. Yeah.
Sorry, just bear with me. I'm just bringing it up, and there we go.
Yeah, great. Okay, got a few votes to come in.
Yep, they're coming in gradually. A picture does, or an image does, certainly paint 1,000 words.
Just got to make sure they're the right words. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, I think most people are.
Yeah.
There are they? Yeah. So if we end that, we'll just see what the results are. So if we can share the results with everybody.
There we go.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that. Right. So first thing we notice, one of the slides. There we go. Interesting that you were mentioning that. Yes, Narinder. So the eye is drawn automatically to some kind of image. And then somebody else went straight to the text in black. Oh, that's an interesting one too, right? Okay. And then I'll come back to this one in a second. So the definition of that word. So 70% didn't and 30% did. Okay, so I shall note that down. Right, well, and we've got 90% on the photos. Okay, so if we can stop the share of that results, we'll talk about what was going on there.
Okay.
Great. So, absolutely graphics. Well, 90% of you, yes, noticed something to do with the images. Very powerful. And if you're trying to tell a story about your data, even though your data may be numbers, use imagery. And use it wisely, but use it, it'll have a massive impact. Not least because, you're back to trying to get attention, you're trying to get it to stick in people's minds, and you're utilizing also the difference between how the brain processes text and how it processes an image. An image is processed far faster. So if you want to get a message across, really use imagery to get a much stronger result more quickly. Now, if we look at the images on this, so there's a sporting one there on the left-hand side. Okay, we're going back to the second point about knowing your audience. If it's relative to, if there are rugby, people who enjoy rugby as part of your audience, then that's an appropriate image to put. If they're footballers, then they probably won't really be drawn to that image. It's all about being context specific and audience relevant to audience. And yes, that is me holding the ball, not looking my best there. And I was doing fine with that lady around my waist until the lady with the pink hat came and bulldozed me from the left-hand side and went to the ground. But never mind, it was a good match. Use the images that really help you convey your point. Now the second part, somebody then said they looked at the black text, and colour is the next key interesting part of this. So there's a reason why on this set of information, the quick 3 tips words is written in black, which actually makes it quite hard to read on most screens, whereas the white stands out much further. Colour can be used in lots of different ways, as in red, green, blue, to bring emphasis onto certain things and others. But often what's overlooked is using shading of greys and whites and blacks to also bring emphasis. So if I move on to move it across like this, there we go. So just to give you a quick, suddenly, quick 3 tips is now in white, stands up a lot more. So if I've created this image here with lots of different factors on it, I can't control where you as an audience are looking. You could be looking at any point and I might be talking about something completely different. So by using colour, for example, on text, I can make you look at a certain area of text, and greying out another area means don't bother looking at that bit, let's concentrate on talking about this bit over here. So colour in all its forms can be very useful. But this third element, simplicity, is really key to take on board as well. Sedulously, where on earth did that word come from? Well, it was actually part of Boris Johnson's very first Downing Street briefing when he described the lockdown that we were about to enter. So before he went into hospital, 17th of March, and he had explained to the nation how our lives were going to dramatically change due to lockdown. And then he used this as his closing summary, and he used that word. Now I'll just read you the overall summary to see what kind of impact you feel you had. So if you imagine the scene, he has already explained why this is all happening, what's going on, and the specifics of it. So he's now come to the end of his talk, and he is merely summarising and leaving you his key thought. And he said, I just want to repeat that key message. The more sedulously, the more zealously, the more meticulously, the more scrupulously we can follow the scientific advice we've been given, the better. And the better we will be able to protect our NHS, the more lives we'll be able to save, and the quicker we will be able to get through this experience, and the more strongly our economy will bounce back. Now in itself, there's nothing wrong with that, but I would argue that he didn't really think about his audience for that one. Because even I found sedulously, I went to look it up in the dictionary. I'd never heard that word before. Now, if you're in a position of getting a message across to people and conveying your meaning to a wide range of stakeholders, which he was given he had the nation in front of him, using words that require people to go to the dictionary isn't usually a good way to really kind of get the impact of the message across. And I'm just picking on one word. Clearly there's a lot else to do with how he delivers it or how anybody delivers it, etc. But the principle being, keep it simple. Don't make it hard for people to get to the meaning of what you're really trying to convey. And of course that for image, playing around again with images being key, that's not Boris Johnson. But he may have looked like that as a child, who knows. But if you want a real guru of this, how to display information, I would strongly recommend you go and have a look at the work done by David McCandless, mentioned on here. So he has a website, Information is Beautiful. He used to be a journalist, but he's worked many years now in how to convey data really expertly. This particular example here is one on his website where straight away, if I look at that, the best things in life really are free. I know straight away what he's telling me, right? It's achievement and affection. Unlike the car sales example, where I didn't really know where that was going, I know the meaning of this data straight away. Now, on his website, you'll find he always puts links to all the underlying data sets that they've used to create these. But they're very powerful, and they're Data storytelling can be done in lots of different ways, and he's got lots of resources around that on the website as well. So strongly recommend looking at his information. So moving from that, we've looked at behavior really needs action, and it's that memory that will actually create that action. But it's hard to do. But there are tools that you can use that really can reinforce that memory part in your audience's mind. We've covered a lot of ground over those 3 ideas, but the thing I wanted to encourage you with is don't be put off. Making a persuasive data story has many components, but it, as this example says here, it's like learning to drive. You could tools and practice, and you get the hang of it, and then you get better and better as you go along. But the one thing I would say is that most people don't go to enough of a detailed level of understanding as to what will actually drive someone to pay attention to your insight and then be led to do something about it in the way that you want them to do. So what have we explored over the last few times? We started looking at data itself. It doesn't have meaning on its own. You need to extract it. We then looked at knowing your audience is really key. And getting that action depends on you creating memory. That will give you persuasive data and persuasive data story. But you remember right at the start, I gave you some numbers. 588 months, 206 months, 30 months. So what on earth was all that about? Well, those data points represent a story, and in fact, they represent my story. So I can be, that sums me up. I've been a human being for 588 months. I've worked in change and transformation in all its guises for 206 months. Can't believe it's that long. And I am the proud owner of 2 gerbils, courtesy of my daughter, for 30 months. So the story of the responsibilities that I've had over my lifetime are encapsulated in those 3 data points. So what is that telling us overall? I would suggest let's stop doing data the old way because it's broken. If you consider using persuasive data storytelling instead, you'll really get your message across. Are there any questions or queries that anybody wanted to go through in the moments that we've got left?
Yes, please feel free to post your questions in the chat box and Amanda will answer them accordingly.
And just to give it that we've got a few moments left, and Nurinder, I know you want to just tie up at the end there.
It's fine.
As I said before, it's a complex area, but there are simple things that everybody can do to really take your data, its meaning, and creating that story that takes you into a new place. So give it a go. Lots of research. Very happy to talk to anybody. Do get in touch with me, and we can talk through different aspects.
Okay, Amanda, we've got a question here from Gareth Bunn. What does doing data the old way really mean?
Very good question, Gareth. Thank you. It's doing it the way where actually you haven't really thought about what the underlying meaning is and how you want to convey that effectively. It's about doing it without thinking who the audience is you're really trying to convince about this data, or who you need to understand, who needs to understand your data. And it's about doing it in a way that you haven't even considered how the human brain works for people to remember and to be compelled to act on the insights that you're sharing from the data that you've compiled.
Right, so, thank you. Yep, sorry, Amanda, were you going to say something else?
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Yep.
Does that answer the question?
Okay, so Michael, thank you for sharing these slides with us. There is a lot to take in. The key point I'm taking away from this to simplify your message, so simplify our message to our teams. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And they say, yeah, thanks, Michael. I think, yes, there's a lot, this sort of whistle stop tour, absolutely. I think that simplification, that's a key thing. And doesn't mean dumbing down, It means making it very relevant to the people you're talking to. So you switch your perspective from what do I want to say to really what's going to be most helpful for them to hear, and in what ways will they find it easiest to absorb, the principles of what I need to convey to them. Yeah.
Perfect. So Amanda, just a quick question from me. You've obviously probably covered it anyway in the slides, but if you could just give us one main tip for data storytelling. So it could be to do with, sometimes I see some adverts or just general, emails that will come in trying to convey a message, but it could be heavy on text, or it just feels like there's too much noise in it. What tip would you give to help them just to simplify it? Is that...
So no, I'm just thinking what's most useful. If you're at a very easy level, if you're writing stuff, because it requires you to sort of write sentences about something, cut it in half and then cut it in half again. Because you'll have, when you actually look back at it, you think, oh, that sentence, I don't need to use 20 words, I could actually use 6 and say the same thing, because your recipient will welcome the much shorter version.
That's right, yeah. And I think just being heavy on text sometimes is just, it just diverts your attention, and you think, right, I'm going to go on to the next email, or I'm just going to go on to the next ad or whatever. Because it can be so heavy on text, or it's just full of noise that you don't really want to be looking at.
Exactly. The other angle on that, of course, is that whatever text you do use, however long or short it is, make it really relevant to the person who's receiving it, rather than relevant to you sending it. Because the more I get stuff that is really relevant to things I'm interested in, or problems that I've got very specifically, the more likely I will be to read it, to do something with it. If it's a generic thing that's just sent from the perspective of the sender rather than from the perspective of the receiver, chances are it won't work.
Perfect. Thank you. So Henry Simpson, great presentation. Did you say that these slides will be available to us? So Amanda, are you going to be, or will you be able to share these maybe via LinkedIn or?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah, I can do that, and as you say, the recording will be on the Thames Valley site as well, won't it? Yeah.
Perfect. So as you can see on the slide, there's Amanda's contact details there. Please also connect with her on LinkedIn so you can then see the slides. As I mentioned at the beginning, the webinar has been recorded as well, so you can just go to the webinar library through our chamber website, that's the thamesvalleychamber.co.uk, and listen to it again, and also share it amongst your network. Amanda's touched on some really interesting points today, educated us really well, and it's been very engaging and quite interactive. I like how she's brought in the polls with the questions, and yeah, it's been great. And it would have been nice if we had the videos as well appearing, but sometimes certain technical things don't allow us to do that. There must be something in the background that I probably needed to do, and I did go into settings, but it just didn't allow the videos to pop up. So hopefully
we're all learning. We're all learning in this virtual
that's right
world.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So thank you, Amanda, for educating us today on persuasive data storytelling. Been very interesting. Just going to move over to the next slide. So that's a chamber slide, and that basically just shows our membership model. And it shows how each tier is designed to attract a business depending on the level of exposure they wish to gain, as well as savings that can be made through the membership. So lots of benefits and opportunities available that we're offering. Frontline for businesses to assist them in lots of different ways. As I mentioned, not with just savings and protection, but there's lots of marketing benefits available as well, and lots of other opportunities. Okay, so the Chamber has launched a business continuity toolkit aimed at ensuring that you've got access to a single portal for support and guidance, and that's around COVID-19. So there's an information and guidance hub on our website which you can access. That's the link there. And it provides detailed information. It's updated on a daily basis, and you can go into that and just learn about what the Chamber's doing, what support is available, and there's some links in there to government links as well that you can just go into to see what they're offering and supporting companies with. So that's that. Also, tied around the current situation of COVID-19, we're delivering lots of webinars with our members. So, for example, today with Amanda. So if you are interested as a member, then please do consider that and contact us with an interesting subject and topic. We can then look into marketing it for you. So we'll do all that for you. So thank you once again to Amanda for delivering today's webinar. There's Amanda's details again. Her mobile number's been stated in the email. And yeah, any questions, give her a call, send her an email, connect with her on LinkedIn. And yeah, that's great. So Amanda, yep, you've answered Henry's question there, yeah?
Yes, yeah, I saw that one come in the chat box. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no, so, you know, anybody needs a conversation or some ideas to bounce around, do get in touch. That's what we're here for. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for listening in, and hopefully see you again. See you, you know, in terms of a video that we can then, you know, share at another webinar. So great. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Narendra, for organising. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Have
Bye,
a great
everybody.
day.
And you. Bye.
Bye-bye.